Okay, members, thank you for that. So we are now moving into agenda item 10, departmental briefing on the Sign Language Bill. So members, an in-confidence copy of the bill is at page 135. And I'd now like to welcome the following officials to our meeting this morning. So I have Ian Greenway, who's Director of Culture. We have Tommy Macaulay, who is Acting Head of Sign Language Policy and Legislation, Sign Language Policy and Legislation Branch, and Gerard Flynn, who is Policy and Legislation Officer in the Sign Language Policy and Legislation Branch. So, Ian, before I invite you to make a brief opening statement, I want to let you and your team know that the committee appreciates your preparation and your time here today. We believe we will be seeing a lot of each other over the next period of time, and I think it's important to say at the outset that not all of the members of this committee were members of the last committee, when you may have set out a lot of background and preparations up until this point. So I think in that sense, it won't always be taken as read. You know, there will be queries and things that the members themselves of this committee will wish to satisfy and update themselves and be familiar with. So we are very keen to get as much background information as possible today, and then once the bill is referred to the committee for scrutiny, we will plan the committee stage and how the call for views should be managed and how stakeholders can be properly and fully involved. And I just want to flag the point that this is a particular piece of legislation that is going to impact people with particular challenges in relation to information. We have facilitated a session previously to set the process out to that sector, but we're very clear that as we move through this bill, we will have to be very cognizant of those additional barriers and challenges and speak to that sector of the population in a way that meets their needs. And I think we're all probably, I'm sure, of one mind that that's a challenge we're all up for. And I know that we will be doing that to the best of our ability. The purpose of today is to get as much possible information to enable all MLAs, not just members of this committee indeed, to play an active part in the second stage debate on the principle of the bill, which I note is now scheduled for Tuesday 18th of February. So that's coming up quite imminently. So can I ask you then, Ian, I think it's yourself, can I ask you to provide your overview and then we'll move on to questions from members? Brian, go ahead.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Just on a technical matter, because I noticed, yes, the bill's second stage is on Tuesday the 18th in the order paper. So has the first stage, has the bill been introduced, or is that to happen this week? It's not in the order paper currently, so maybe we could chase that up.
Next week. Double check that.
Stages, and I think.
No, but when I looked at it,
Double check that.
It wasn't in the order. Wasn't on the order paper. I know it's only a couple of minutes, whatever, to introduce it. But yeah. Anyway, it's just
fair point, Brian. Appreciate that. So, listen, I'll go back to yourselves, and if you want to go ahead and give us that briefing, then we'll get the members' questions. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to brief you on the Sign Language Bill this morning. By way of background, the Department for Communities had the Executive Department Policy Lead for British Sign Language and for Irish Sign Language. The functions fall under our Cultural and Linguistic Policy remit and are the responsibility of the Sign Language Policy and Legislation Branch within the Department's Culture Division, which in turn forms part of Engaged Communities Group. Over the past number of years, branch officials have engaged with the deaf community and executive departments throughout the policy development stage of the bill. Tommy and Gerard and their colleague Patricia Leaper have been responsible for engagement with the Office of Legislative Counsel for the drafting of the clauses of the bill. And as you mentioned, Chair, we've provided you with detailed written briefing and an in-confidence copy of the bill ahead of its introduction, which we will follow up Mr. Kingston's comment and just make sure that we haven't blinked and missed it for next Monday, which is our understanding.
I'm following that now.
I'd like to provide the committee with some additional information on the rationale for the bill and the work which the department is taking forward to support the future legislation, some of which has its roots during the COVID emergency. Some might ask, why do deaf people need sign language legislation when they have redress through the Disability Discrimination Act 1995, as amended by the Disability Discrimination Northern Ireland Order 2006, the Special Education Needs and Disability Northern Ireland Order 2005, and the statutory obligations arising from Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. The deaf community advises us that disability legislation is not the appropriate vehicle to ensure access to information and services through linguistic and cultural recognition. The Sign Language Bill does this. They advise that disability legislation does not support the promotion of rights of the deaf community to develop deaf culture. The Sign Language Bill does this. They advise that disability legislation does not, through the promotion of BSL and ISL, provide for classes for deaf children and their families. The Sign Language Bill does this. The social exclusion of sign language users is a pervasive issue that affects their ability to participate fully in society. Despite sign language being a legitimate and rich form of communication, a language, many deaf individuals continue to face significant barriers that hinder their involvement in everyday activity. A primary source of this exclusion can be attributed to the lack of accessibility to information and services due to the inadequate sign language interpretation. Deaf individuals may struggle to access information and essential services, leading not only to feelings of isolation and frustration, but also risk their well-being as witnessed, for instance, during the COVID pandemic. Moreover, societal attitudes often contribute to the exclusion of sign language users. Misconceptions about deafness and sign language can lead to discrimination, stigmatization, and lack of awareness regarding the capabilities and contributions of deaf individuals. This can result in limited opportunities in the workforce and hinder their overall social integration. In summary, the social exclusion of sign language users is a multifaceted issue rooted in accessibility barriers, communication challenges, and societal attitudes. To foster an inclusive society, it is essential to address these challenges by promoting awareness, providing resources, and ensuring that sign language is recognised and valued as an integral mode of communication. The Sign Language Bill does this. The team in the department has worked with the Health and Social Care Board to set up a new free remote interpreting service for BSL and ISL users to allow deaf people to access an interpreter using their mobile phone and other devices. As the policy lead for BSL-ISL, the department had initially agreed to fund this temporary service during the COVID emergency, which will be commissioned by and monitored by the Health and Social Care Board. The Department of Health has provided the majority of funding, and the service is now a permanent resource for deaf people across all health and social care services. The department has funded remote accredited BSL-ISL courses with a view to increasing the pool of qualified deaf and hearing students to follow a pathway to qualification and registration as interpreters and translators to support future legislation. The funding has evolved and increased to support a BSL-ISL interpreter training program delivered by the Foyle Deaf Association, with successful students due to register as accredited interpreters in the near future. In addition, the department has developed, provided funding for, and launched a 2-year MA in sign language interpreting at Queen's University Belfast, comprising both BSL and ISL students, both deaf and hard of hearing. This will provide an additional increase in capacity to address both the current pressures for interpreters and to contribute to the expected increase in demand with the legislation. The team has worked closely with deaf organisations specialising in the delivery of early years family sign language courses to ensure funded courses will move fully online with full support from deaf tutors. These courses have now reverted to face-to-face with the option of online support and resources. The department's funding supports learning from sign to play for babies and toddlers to accredited qualifications ranging from NVQ Level 1 beginners to Level 6 degree equivalent for parents of deaf children, to provide them with a linguistic skill set to help their deaf children acquire signing in the family home, as hearing children acquire spoken language within the family environment. At a Queen's University Sign Language Conference, The Fact of Deafness, Perception, Representation and Visibility in March 2024, the department's Northern Ireland Family Signing Programme was acknowledged by the Chief Executive of the British Deaf Association as the best of its kind across the UK. Turning to the bill, and not seeking to replicate the briefing already provided, the bill provides for the Department for Communities as the lead department and provides it with various enabling powers. The department's presence and profile, as well as its long-standing support for the deaf community and sector, has ensured it has the confidence of the deaf community in this lead policy role. The bill will ensure greater accessibility to information and services for sign language users supported by the investment I've spoken about to increase the number of professionally trained and accredited interpreters. In welcoming the Minister's announcement on the executive agreement for the introduction of the Sign Language Bill to the Assembly, the British Deaf Association released a statement acknowledging the significant role played by members of the deaf community in collaboration with other deaf organisations and departments in preparation of the bill. The department will continue to engage with and support the deaf community and executive department colleagues through its lead role in the Sign Language Partnership Group. It will continue to bring its many years of experience and expertise in the sign language field, as well as its resources, and will expect and encourage other stakeholders to continue to do likewise. The bill tells us that British Sign Language and Irish Sign Language are languages. When we accept this, we can then foster that inclusive society to ensure that sign language users can fully participate in society, and we can address those feelings of isolation and frustration I've previously referenced. Moreover, those societal attitudes which often contribute to the exclusion of sign language users through misconceptions about deafness and sign language can be eradicated. Thank you for your time. We're, of course, happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, and I just want to say absolutely welcome this. I see this as I mentioned this at the committee's event in the Long Gallery. I see this as a fundamental human right, and it is a human right. I have to say that the atmosphere and the positivity in the Long Gallery that day was really inspiring, and also I think salutary in the extent that the simple reality of us moving to provide that basic cover could be so welcome, because it was so absent previously. So I think that's really to be noted, and I suppose part of the work that we're doing. So can I just ask then what level of co-design was taken with those who use British and Irish Sign Language in the preparation of the bill?
I'm going to ask Tommy to answer that, because I've been at this a year. He has been at this probably 20 years. I think he had hair when he started. So I'm going to pass that to Tommy if I may.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you. Yes, this has its roots going way back. The Sign Language Partnership Group, which we co-chair and provide secretariat for, was founded around 2008 with, at that point, the mission to improve access to services for sign language users. It's represented by executive departments and also representatives of the deaf community. The roots of the Sign Language Bill were within the Sign Language Framework back in 2015. And those objectives, of which Objective 1 is legislation, was co-designed fully with representatives from the deaf community on the group. In addition to that, as work on the bill has evolved, we have run a series of roadshows throughout Northern Ireland. We have held a sign language network at Queen's University that we funded. We've seconded the manager of the British Deaf Association for Northern Ireland, Magella McAteer, so that we had real-time input on the policy development as we got closer to the bill. So at every stage along the way, we have, as Ian has alluded to in his opening statement, we have a real close relationship with the deaf community, not just at group organisation level, but actually individually within the community.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose the bill itself coming forward is welcome, but I suppose the real test will be in terms of the impact the bill will have. So what do you assess as being the tangible impact that this bill, if passed, would have on the lives of people who use sign?
I talked at the generality about destigmatisation. I thank my colleagues for giving me very long multi-syllabled words throughout that opening statement. But I think in practical terms, which I think is where you're going more, Chair, this is really around their ability to access public services and not assume that some writing along the bottom of a screen meets their needs. It doesn't. All the evidence is it doesn't. And to do that in a way that is no extra disruption for them, whether that be somebody coming in the background onto a call when they're talking to their GP or whatever it may be. Of course, we have to balance that up with what the cost and practicality of that is. And the bill talks about all reasonable steps, that public bodies will take all reasonable steps. I anticipate a number of things at committee stage being homed in on, and that could well be one of them. There is drafting around what that means. But how we find that right balance, for me, starts with fully respecting the rights of everyone in this place to access services which they need or which improve their well-being and their lives. We cannot exclude those people who rely on sign language. How we do that in a practical way, I think, is some of the detail. And then statutory rules will bring those provisions, those enabling powers, into practice. We are keen, because this journey has been such an extensive one, to try and work on some of those statutory rules in parallel with the progress of the bill, so that we don't have too long a wait to get to that practical difference.
Go ahead, Tommy.
I was just going to add to what Ian has said there, that part of the bill will be the development of best practice and statutory guidance. And referencing back to your question about co-design, we're already in that space in co-designing that best practice and guidance. The British Deaf Association are leading on this through, and they will report back to the Sign Language Partnership Group, and that will then evolve the evolution of the regulations for the bill.
Thank you. And final one for me before I go to members then is around, and you've sort of brought us on to that, I think, nicely in a way, in the sense that I presume, the outworking of this bill will mean that we will need to have more interpreters than we currently have. Is that work ongoing in parallel? What's your assessment of how many more we're likely to need to bring the bill to a tangible fruition? And is that work underway in terms of doing that training? Can that start now? Is that being considered? How are we managing?
I will answer the second part. I'll perhaps pass the numbers question to Tommy. Yes, I went and visited the Full Deaf Association before Christmas. I saw some of their interpreting classes. They are busy training people in both BSL and ISL, ISL being a particularly challenging, very small number of, single handful of interpreters at the moment in this jurisdiction, and not that many more, to be honest, in the neighbouring jurisdiction. We have now the MA, the Master of Arts in Sign Language at Queen's, that has a cohort of 20 students. So we are doing a number of things, and actually have been working, for instance, with the BBC about how to give greater resilience to their signing in their news programmes, where they were relying on quite a small number of people. So how can we both give these students more experience and widen that pool? I'll defer to Tommy in terms of numbers.
Okay, I think currently at the moment there's circa 39 sign language interpreters. In Northern Ireland, we hope that Foil Deaf Association will bring on board 4 more interpreters in the near future. As Ian has mentioned, we have linked up with Queen's recently to launch the MA. That will be that's a blend of hearing, deaf, BSL, ISL students. Now, not only that, what we found during COVID, with there were many funding support streams. We used ours to provide gainful employment for tutors to move online, to provide free, at that point, accredited qualifications in BSL, ISL, ranging from level 1 beginners to level 6 degree equivalent. And that cohort are now making their way through Foil Deaf Association, through Queen's University, and we'll press repeat, because we are conscious that, as in every profession, there's natural wastage. So some of the awful term, I know, but hopefully you appreciate what I mean. At some point, current cohort of interpreters will retire. And the concern was, and learning from other jurisdictions, when they brought in their sign language legislation, there was no throughput or pathway that was supported. I think we are fairly unique in that point, in that we are supporting students from level 1 through to level 6 degree equivalent, and then through their interpreter training programme to not only qualify as interpreters but register with the registration boards. Very much conscious that the bill will increase demand, learn the lessons from other jurisdictions.
I just pick up that strand that Tommy left there. Clause 10 of the bill talks about accreditation of teachers and interpreters, because what we don't want is a Wild West out there. We have to have accreditation. We don't envisage for that 39 or that 2-figure sum setting up our own accreditation scheme. We would envisage docking in with other accreditation schemes for operational efficiency, if nothing else. But that will be a requirement of the bill, that we can properly say you are a properly accredited signer.
Yeah, important too. And your mention of the BBC, actually, I do need to pick up on that. We as a committee have been very disappointed that the BBC within the past year have dropped their prime lunchtime slot with interpreter. We've raised that with them. I would certainly hope, I'm not putting this to you as a question because I know it's outside of your, but I would certainly hope that the passage of this bill will ensure that that is reinstated and that further steps are taken to provide and to normalise the use of that. I think that was a really disappointing, I have to say, step by the BBC. But
I'm not here, Chair, to be an advocate for the BBC, but we have also talked to them about that. They have made a genuine and I believe quite strong case, it's for others to consider, that actually the provision of signing of news programmes in the BBC Northern Ireland is now better than it was when it was solely restricted to that one programme at lunchtime. That is the case they would make. I'm not here to advocate for them, I'm just saying it may be a broader issue than it might appear.
Yeah. And there is certainly benefit of them increasing, and I recognise that. My feeling on that, my own feeling on that, was that this was one time in the day when people saw as a normal part of the process the sign language. And I think you're right in the sense of they are not only languages but beautiful languages. And I actually would have had time allowed, I always watched that second section just to kind of absorb it. So anyway, we'll not dwell too overly on that point, but certainly I would like to see a much broader increase of the visibility across the line. I'm hoping the bill will do some of that. So we'll go to Kelly then, please.
Thank you very much. And I absolutely welcome the sign language bill. To my absolute disgrace, although I'm a member of the deaf community, I don't sign because my hearing loss has come on later in life. But there's a couple of questions about that I just wanted to check with yourselves. Chapter, I know it's not the committee stage at this stage, but it's just for my clarification. Prescribed organisations, obviously not proscribed organisations, prescribed organisations, it does say later in the bill that talks about that will be government departments, including communities. Do we know, or will it be listed anywhere in the explanatory notes or elsewhere, what those prescribed organisations will be? Because if it's just the departments, I'd be worried that the health trusts or GP surgeries or whoever may not be included. Is there any definition that we can look back to on what that prescribed organisations are?
I'm going to pass that one to Jared as a matter about the bill.
All public bodies will be listed, so that will include councils, arm's length bodies and all departments. There is some exceptions in clause 7 where some public bodies can be exempted from clause 3, their duties, but not departments. So we'll consult with all the public bodies and make regulations and list those, but the basis of that list will be whether you're defined as a public body or not.
I'm just worried about that. For instance, if you look at a school, is that a public body? Depends on its status, I suppose.
The school itself would be under the administration of the Education Authority, or the Education Authority falls under the public body. So those details and how we...
Yeah, so I just want to address a couple of wee sort of technical points, just to say that the reason it's not in the order paper is the Speaker still completing his checks in terms of competency, and this just to flag, this is not scrutiny session, so we will get to that. This is more an information, so just want to delineate that in fairness to the panel.
But if it helps us understand what may come along in committee stage, it served a purpose. And
That prescribed one, for instance, I think about voluntary grammars or grant maintained integrated. They may not come under the EA, you see, so their management bodies are different. It's just to understand that, because it's something I want to pick up on to make sure we can get this applied to as many people as possible. The other thing was, for clarification, is just to ask, I absolutely love the fact that there is a concentration on children in the bill. However, from my point of view, the deaf community is expanded by the number of older people who have hearing loss later in life, who we know are isolated and excluded from society because of the lack of communication that they have. I was just wondering in that clause 2 too, if there was any opportunity to expand those provision of classes to adults. I know it talks about in 3, to be honest, the definition of it's not 3. It's the definition of who's the deaf community is very wide, which is great, but then clause 2 takes it quite particular to children, which of course is important, but I was just wondering, is there anything there, because I'm a bit worried that training for frontline staff and adults would be key.
I mean, currently, I'll take you back to COVID and then we'll come back to where we are now as a result of that. Obviously, during COVID, we all experienced social exclusion, and it brought into stark focus what the deaf community have been experiencing. Now, there were a number of initiatives. We had the interpreters signing ministerial daily briefings. We have a lot of information on mainstream news, which wasn't available to the deaf community. So we supported then and continue to support Northern Ireland Deaf News, which takes news and things of interest to the deaf community, translates them into BSL, ISL. However, like every language, like my parents wouldn't have understood when they were alive some concepts that are around now, and languages evolve. The deaf older generation of deaf would use I suppose a more sort of nuanced type of signing, heavily ingrained in finger spelling. So they weren't picking up on the sort of evolution of language. The term coronavirus evolved into COVID, etc., etc., etc. So we were approached by an organisation, Deaf OAP, and they made that point. Listen, this is fantastic what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Can we have access to it through our style of signing? And we continue to support them. Now, those classes that I referred to, beginner to level 6, are open to all.
Oh, okay.
So currently you would have deaf people who are left school, for example, who want a qualification in their language and may or may not be interested in a professional career. As a result, that can have access to it and do have access to it. So those classes, even though it's referred to in level 2, are live at the moment. They may not be universal at this point, but we as a department do fund classes through introduction, level 1, level 6, open to hearing of any age. Tailored family signing classes for families with signs heavily ingrained in everyday family life. And older generation deaf people can access those courses as part of the accredited scheme.
But it's not laid out in the legislation that's specifically for children in it?
Yes, there's a heavy emphasis on children because that, again, the co-design process for us arriving at the bill was that, like any language, if you don't have new language users, the languages die out. And then when you get to that stage, there is a terminal velocity, after which point the language is gone and you can't save it. So that is why, not only that, but the research there is into the sort of beneficial effects of family signing that offsets behavioural problems, the increased mental health issues that kids who don't have access to sign language experience in later life. We have gone heavy on that, yeah, and that's in consultation with the deaf community. Excuse me.
No, it's just I was concerned that the older people, while there's a concentration absolutely on children, and that's right, that older adults, pension age adults or late middle age, and the frontline staff that may be working with them would have access. But that's good.
I mean, the frontline staff during COVID, we reached out into care homes, so for those deaf people who are isolated in care homes and the support staff. Likewise for the children's family signing, it's their support network, creche workers, classroom assistants, teachers, and we are in regular contact with Deaf OAP organisation and
Thank you.
are informed by their advice.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to Morris on Zoom then, and then we'll come to Malaysia, and then Nicola, and then I have Brian as well. So go ahead, Morris, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks very much for the presentation. It's a long-awaited legislation. We talk mainly here of British Sign Language and Irish Sign Language. Is there a co-designed? That's phone. We threw it out the window. Is there a co-designed standardisation of sign language? When we talk about 96% of the population speak English, about 6%, maybe 5% speak Irish, but there's also Lithuanian, Polish, Portuguese, Mandarin, Arabic and Romanian people in Northern Ireland now. And I was thinking along the lines of we had a standardised, co-designed standardised sign language, that one sign language would fit all. I know it's a big ask, but has that been explored?
I suppose the simple answer to that would be, you're familiar with Esperanto, which was this mythical language
I did know a
throughout the
lady.
world.
I knew a lady once who was fluent in Esperanto. It's just
there
not
we go.
mythical.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is. It was there.
Yeah, but the concept of that is that every language in the world can be, everybody will understand it. There is Gustuno, which is for international conferences for sign language. Very few people know it. If you're a deaf professional who accesses these conferences, you will see on the stage, and we've used it, we would have BSL, ISL and Gustuno International. But regarding, I think hopefully one of the things the legislation will do is the key piece of a message for Hearing Society is to just view sign languages and signed languages. Perhaps the problem is in the use of the noun sign language. It is like spoken languages. There are multiple languages, there are multiple dialects, there are multiple patois. For example, in the Northwest, where you have BSL and ISL mingling, you will see that intertwining and evolution of so bespoke languages. There is no plans or project or program that I'm aware of throughout the world to standardise it, because I suppose that we're making the case for deaf culture is very much ingrained in their language, BSL, ISL, Portuguese Sign Language, Libra, which is Brazilian Sign Language. Every community is proud of their language. So I suppose the short answer would be no.
Morris, anything further on?
No, just a thought that we could have perhaps standardised the Irish and the British together into some sort of local sign language specific to Northern Ireland, even but it's just it's welcome. I do welcome it, but I just thought that would be an idea that we could look at in the future.
Yeah.
But no, I'm happy enough.
Yeah,
Happy
no.
enough. And I understand the need for sign language in all different languages. So just a thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I get your thought, and I suppose for me it's more a case, for me personally, it's more a case of vive la difference and the rich tapestry that we have that all languages bring. And I think it's crucial that from the very start we consider this as a language in that sense, bringing its own value in that. I do think there's an important point around how we ensure that people who maybe don't speak either of those languages are given forms of, so I do think there's a real point within that, Morris, but we'll be looking at these issues all in greater detail as we go on anyway. Just letting Sean know we have your indication there as well, Sean, so we will be coming to you, but I'll go now to Melissa.
Well, Father Overlig and Sean, you're all very welcome here today. And it's funny just looking at the legislation and the likes of it, and even the paper and that on sign language, it sort of brings home to me just that where language in itself is no threat to anyone. In fact, it's there as a means of communication, and it should be individually or person-centred in that respect, and that it's good to see that you've taken on board both the Irish sign language and British sign language, and that's reflective of that. I wish that was the same attitude was applied to all languages as well, too, in every other respect. But to get round to essentially what my question is that where you have stated too, like that the prime objective, we'll say, this legislation is so that people will be able to communicate and not there with statutory authorities or departments and the likes of it, and that in your response to a question from our chair, you had when he asked about the financial implication and the amount of people who would be there available, say, within the different departments and so on. And you had said that it would be where it seemed to be reasonable in terms of departments. Does that concern you? In fact, and it being described as being seen to be reasonable, if that's decided by departments, can that be used as a cop-out?
I think in all of life there is a balance to be struck, and these people are very badly excluded. The average deaf person will leave school with little to no qualifications, with a reading age and not intellectual age, but an outworking of that age below teenage. And if you read books written by the deaf community, there's one that I've passed around the team. There are people driven to suicide and all sorts of things. They are horrendously excluded, it is discriminatory, they are mocked, all of these things. So I would argue very hard for a decent amount of funding to be provided. And to give you a feel, we currently, for the programmes that Tommy mentioned, it's around about £500,000 a year. So just to give you a feel of the scale, in the big scheme of things, it isn't very much that is needed to make this profound difference for some of the people who live here. But we cannot do anything with complete ignorance of where we are financially, in where we sit with that. So I do think small amounts of money will make a profound difference. If we didn't put in the phrases reasonable, the courts would construe those in anyway and would form their own judgments. We are trying to do that up front and be open about it rather than leave it to a case law later on. And I'm sure we will return to this issue as we go through the committee stage and the clause by clause.
I just hope that you will get the service that you definitely deserve in every respect for the deaf community, and both British and an Irish Sign Language.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah,
with
go ahead,
your
please,
information. There is already a service in place that we helped us set up, as Ian mentioned at the start, with the Health and Social Care Services, the Regional Communication Support Service, and we're represented on the board of that. And that has evolved from the COVID emergency intervention to a remote and face-to-face interpreting service. Also takes on board lip reading and note-taking, and that service is there for the health and deaf people to access all health and social care services. So there's already models there that we can look at. And the reference within the bill to taking reasonable steps then goes on to mention that something is accessible to individuals in the deaf community for the purpose of this section, if as well as being accessible to them in general terms, including as respects of convenience, access is at no extra cost to them. So part of the work we'll be doing through the Sign Language Partnership Group with our colleagues and partners in the deaf community through best practice and statutory guidance is looking at what is reasonable. Is it access all areas, which are the feedback we've got so far is no, key services. And then through that guidance and best practice, we will be able to establish what is the best model and what the costs are likely to be.
Okay, thank you. So I have a few extra members have come in now, so just bear that in mind time-wise, please, members. So I'm going then to Nicola, and then we're going to Brian, then Sharon. Go ahead, Nicola.
Thank
Our new
you.
Deputy Chair.
Thank you,
please.
Chair, and thank you for your briefing. As the Chair says, it's my first meeting of the committee, so it's an introduction to this here bill, so I do appreciate your update. I suppose the first question is, there will be, if this bill is enacted, there'll be a legal requirement or statutory requirement on public bodies to provide access to information services through sign language. Can you first of all give us an indication of how that will actually, what that will actually look like when it's implemented, and how you propose to monitor and evaluate how successful it is, I suppose, and if changes will need to be made down the line?
I'll just start that off and then I'll pass the heart of it to Jared to my left. The bill will set out the public bodies that are required under statute to follow through this process. That doesn't mean that others can't, but they are the ones prescribed, as Kelly said earlier. And then there will be statutory guidance produced by the department going through the consultation and the subsidiary legislation routes through this committee and through the Assembly as to what that means. That will be framed by best practice, it will be framed by the reasonableness test and so on, but it will really set out the what is to be done. I'll let Jared pick then up anything more on that and the monitoring piece.
I couldn't really add much more than that, Ian. The statutory guidance will set out for any public body the steps they should take, and they must have regard to that statutory guidance, which will be fully consulted on with the deaf community and the committee and all interested bodies. So it'll be on that basis, it'll be on a one-by-one issue that you'll decide whether something's reasonable or not, and following the guidance that's statutory made, that it'll make those determinations.
Do you want to pick up the monitoring piece?
The monitoring of that, we were doing a report every 5 years. Okay. In relation to that. That's also within the bill, and we're obliged to do that. So.
And will that be in conjunction with the deaf community?
Everything we do will be in conjunction with the deaf community. I mean, they're the main stakeholder here, so
yes.
we won't be taking a step forward without have consulted.
And that is protected within the bill as it stands, that we must consult with the deaf community. The current situation is that there are some contracts across the public service for video remote service, which is if you're deaf, you have an app on your phone, you dial in, sign, and then make a phone call on your behalf. Other public bodies will provide face-to-face interpreting, and that's the current model, and that's what should happen under Disability Discrimination Act adjustment. Now, whether it does is another issue, and I've referred to how our health and social care currently provide support for the sign language community.
Just one final question, Chair. I suppose, and like obviously this is really, really important for the deaf community, and they've been arguing for this here for a long time. But you know, there is that there stigma, I suppose, attached to it, and they've I imagine, experienced their own kind of issues throughout the years with that. So I wonder, is there an element here of education for people of hearing ability throughout the community, and do you expect there to be an increased usage within the rest of the community of using sign language because of the bill?
I think if we can make inroads in destigmatisation, and that isn't just the legislation, but that hopefully will be a catalyst to a wider societal understanding. I would anticipate people who may be able to sign but don't choose to do it, and people may want to learn it, and there will be an osmosis out through the process. With any language, if you go back to language models, the Fishman model or whatever, it is visibility and normalisation of that visibility. With sign language, it's particularly visible. It's not just on the walls, it's in front of you. If we normalise that, and if this bill can take a step on that journey, I think it's a really, really important step.
That's an important point too, and hopefully this will help to encourage others to use it. But thank you for that there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, and many years ago, or since many years ago, I have tried several times actually to get on courses. Our own local college, Southwest College, has done it. And every time I've applied, it's been oversubscribed already, and I've never managed to get. But I do intend to get back to it. But I think it shows you the demand out there, and you know, it certainly shows that. Brian, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your attendance today. Reading through the bill, the bill's only the start of your role. The department will have that ongoing responsibility as a lead department, and looking through the sections on issuing guidance, best practice, making regulations, and the 5 yearly reports. So I want to ask, what resource will the department be committing to that role that it is playing when it takes on these enabling powers in terms of promoting but also evaluating what has been done by other public bodies?
I think it's fair to say we're working through the detail of that. Currently, the team, which includes Tommy and Jared and a job share partner, Patricia, who I mentioned earlier, there are 2 other members of the team who are more focused on the outreach training, that support, rather than being with the bill. As the bill moves through, the bill work will reduce. The follow-up, as you say, Mr. Kingston, will grow. How we manage, is there going to be a central service for signing, is it going to be part of the translation hub, etc., needs to be worked through as to where the different resource lines sit, if you like, across the department. We're working through sign language of itself, connection with our other linguistic duties, our other cultural duties, so it's not something we've lost sight of. I don't envisage it being a vast increase in overall resource. I think it will be a changing from some of the legislative duties to some of the consequential duties, if you like, alongside continuing to support the deaf community, support the training and accreditation pieces.
And I could just add to that, we already have the vehicle in place to do that through the Sign Language Partnership Group, which we chair and provide secretariat to, and bearing in mind that the bill is cross-cutting, and it's not just the Department for Communities that will have obligations or need to bring resource to that. We've already done it. We've outlined some of the various projects and programmes we support, and including bridging the gap with yourselves and trying to ready the assembly for the bill as well. So we have a pretty wide network of partners and collaborations where we promote sign language. And going back again to the health and social care contract that was at our instigation, that at the start of COVID we went and promoted the service. So there are ways and means, and we do expect other partners to come on board.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really brief, Brian, please.
No, and just to comment on that, as in all bills which are cross-cutting, it's important that one department still, all departments will have to take action, but it's important that one is also maintains that lead role, you know, and has a resource.
And that's set down in the bill,
yeah,
assuming it's enacted.
Yeah, no, I see that. And the other comment, can you say a bit more in practice how, and you've maybe referenced some of this, how you would see this being delivered, the greater provision of sign language interpreting? I mean, and some public bodies may be able to have, and on occasions or regularly have staff present as interpreters, but you also referenced to online technological support. Could you say a wee bit more about how that might roll out?
I think, as in all things, technology will play a growing part, whether we like it or loathe it, it will play a growing part. And the concept of wanting to have a conversation with your GP, if I just take that as an example, often that can be scheduled, sometimes it's a more urgent conversation. Having an app on your phone where you can push a button and that calls in a signer in BSL or ISL in the background onto the phone, the GP has the same thing. I suspect that's going to be a route more than all traipsing along to the local surgery or whatever, which has just its complexities around it. Quite what that technology looks like, quite how far that goes, quite how far, dare I say, AI and other things play a part in that, are yet to be fully worked through. But I would envisage, on demand really, there would be free at the point of use access to signing in the required sign language. That's why we have to have enough of the interpreters there on call. And I would see, as it already is, as Tommy said, in the health and social care setting, that is centralised to the various trusts. Probably a model that has that centralised for all public bodies. There may be some, as you suggested, Mr. Kingston, who may have sufficient call on that they have their own facility and manage peaks and troughs. I do think quite a lot of it will be centralised within our department. One of the main calls on the translation hub is our benefits colleagues, the front of office. I would anticipate that being a big call on the signing service as well, just from the sheer numbers and the volumes. Having that available, not needing to go to the Bangor JBO or the Enniskillen JBO or whatever it is, being able to do it with technology. I wouldn't like to say quite how AI and other things will play into that space. I'm too old to have fully worked through all of those technological pieces.
Okay,
Thank you, Brian. And actually, thank you, Ian, for that reference to Enniskillen, because I think that's going to be a crucial thing to ensure those services reach out into those more rural areas. We've actually touched earlier on the other deprivation in those areas existing, so that's really
other constituents as well, but I chose one not at random, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. So, Sean, I'm going to you there, Sean. So if I could ask you, Sean, just to be as succinct as possible, please. Thank you. We may not have Sean online. I'll just give it another second or two.
The mic's on now.
Yeah, the mic's on. So your mic's on, Sean. Go ahead. We don't see you, but maybe we can hear you. So we're seeing you now, Sean, but still not hearing.
Sorry, I think my internet has just cut out.
Yep, go ahead. We're hearing you now, Sean. Thank you.
Great. The Vice Chair actually asked the main crux of my question, which was around the monitoring and evaluation of the statutory obligations. So it was really, and then my second question was about budgetary allocations going forward for this. But I just want to say how refreshing it is to hear sign language being talked, not just about, not just in terms of disability, as a beautiful language and a culture. So I think that's really important. But yeah, just something about the budget going forward that the team thinks will.
Thank you. You were breaking up quite badly there, Sean, but we got the full sense of it, I do believe, and I'll go back to Ian. So thank you, Ian.
Yes, I think for what I heard Oswald Holland saying, it was, we've talked about the monitoring, we've talked about the budget. I've given a sense that it's around about £500,000 that we are supporting these different things with at the moment. I think that may give a sense of scale. We're still trying to work through. It's proving very difficult to get anywhere near definitive on how many Irish Sign Language users, how many British Sign Language users are there. Different studies, some of them are referenced in the paper we provided. In the census, there's a self-declaration about different languages. It is a self-declaration from the tiniest usage to being level 6. So we have struggled to get to definitive numbers, even with all our stakeholder work, which does make it slightly difficult to get to budget numbers as well. But that will be a part of an ongoing journey through the next stages of the process.
And part of that analysis that we're carrying out is looking and learning lessons across the piece. Certainly with the regional communication support service that Department of Health provides, that is a rich vein of volume of callers that are using the service that will give us some insight. Now, we know that like everyone across society, everyone at some stage will need healthcare. So they'll be the largest user by probably considerable distance. Then you'll have things like benefits, access to councils, housing executive, and that will give us some sort of baseline to go on that we will try to extrapolate figures from. And again, once the work with the British Deaf Association and the Sign Language Partnership Group on best practice and statutory guidance completes, we'll have an even better picture of what services to what level are be provided for sign language interpreting or translations.
Okay, thank you. And so, listen, as I said, we are going to obviously, there's a significant piece of work here, a very welcome piece of work, and I appreciate the start we've made today in terms of the information, and as Sean has noted there, that kind of, which comes across that drive and passion to treat it as a language and absolutely an asset to all of us and part of that rich culture. But for now, thank you, and we will see you again soon. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.